Hello and welcome to today's video. This is actually recorded back in January 2020 and is the first video of the year. So I came to start up the Micra one day in January. It was actually a Saturday, funnily enough, and I found that the battery had failed. So it's still holding a charge, albeit a very low charge. It was holding, once I get the multimeter sorted out, it was holding around 11.21-ish volts, so which is obviously not enough to start the car at all. I decided, because the battery had been on the car since I bought it, and I bought the car nearly 5 years ago now, I decided to replace the battery with a brand new battery. It's actually 11.57, not 11.21. So it was almost 12 volts, but not quite. It was enough to crank the engine over, but it was not enough to actually start the car. So it would crank very slowly. So we got the negative and the positive terminal, and we got the two bolts there, or two nuts rather, holding on the battery clamp. And on this particular example, all of those are held in with a single 10mm selection of nuts. Not a single 10mm nut, that would be weird. So, first thing to do is to remove the negative cable, making sure that the key is removed from the ignition and actually kept in your pocket, because the last thing you want is the central lock-in triggering and locking you out of the car. That would be very annoying. You'll notice that the actual battery clamps seem to be a standard size, but the battery terminals on these batteries for the Micra are incredibly small. So there's actually a couple of infills that you get, and the new battery actually comes with those infills. So in one situation I have to reuse one of the old ones as it was stuck in the actual clamp itself. But in the case of the positive terminal there, I actually use the old one that was sorry, I had to use a new one. On the negative one I used the old one that was still stuck in the actual clamp itself. You've got these two 10mm nuts which go onto a couple of poles. The poles themselves lock into the battery tray, and what will happen is you will see in a second is they do just fall down into the tray itself. So you need two hands in order to get them back on, and what I did is I've got this cable tie holding the induction trunk into one of the posts, is I had to put the post through the cable tie. The cable tie is there because the induction trunking likes to rattle about. When you've put the cable tie on there, it actually stops it rattling. It's because one of the bolts that holds it in has actually sheared. The plastic has sheared off the actual induction trunking, so I've just used the cable tie to keep it in place. It beats having to replace the whole trunking. This is the battery I've been using. It's from Halfords. That's the old one, also from Halfords. Cost about £100, but if you get it with a trade card, the cost actually comes down to £80. It's got a 5-year guarantee. And yes, you can probably get it cheaper from elsewhere, but Halfords was open and I needed a battery. So on obviously with positive first, and then you follow off with the negative terminal, which will be going on once I manage to fiddle this on with my oversized fingers. Make sure that it's on tight and give the cable a bit of a move to see if you can actually move it at all. If you have any residue on the cable, or the connector rather, give it a clean before actually putting the new battery in. What I did also after I'd finished, and I didn't show this on film, was I applied a layer of Vaseline to both of these connectors, and that stops them from corroding, which is ideal really. You want to not have them corrode because that can cause problems with charging and also problems with starting the car because you're not making a proper connection to the battery. So this one goes on. As you can see there, that's coming on very well. Does move about a little bit, but if you sort of twist it into another position, it just seems to sort of cause that insert to tighten up against the battery post, and that actually keeps it in position. So what I did at this point was started faffing about trying to get the post back on, and noted that I couldn't actually do it with one hand holding the camera and another one trying to fiddle it all back into place. So in a moment we will be cutting to the actual clamp put fully back on. So as you can see, it's fully back on. I had to slightly wrestle it into place by just clamping it together. Because I got quite large hands, I was actually able to span the battery and actually clamp both sides together and then put that top piece on. It's then just a case of simply tightening up those two 10mm nuts, which I'm doing now. Incidentally, the process of clamping it together took under a minute, so this is actually filmed in real time, and we're just over 6.5 minutes in, and we've already got the new battery installed. So this just gives you an idea of how quick a job this is, and also just how easy it is as well. It's, you know, something you can do yourself with just a 10mm spanner. That really is, you know, as simple as that. I didn't need to even get my full massive toolkit box out. It's actually just a 10mm spanner. In fact, this basic socket set that I have here is actually overkill for this job. If you've got something resembling a 10mm spanner, it'll work. The next stage is just something that I wanted to do myself. You don't necessarily have to. If you are definitely sure it's the battery, you don't have to do this. But I wanted to make sure that the new battery had some charge in it. It does have, like the other Halfords batteries, or other batteries from Halfords, a little indicator that you can see just to the bottom right where you could. The battery's measuring a healthy 12.21 volts, which means we should be good to go. So I inadvertently put the phone in my pocket and then bring it out again, which was a bit silly. I could have cut that, but hey. The next stage is with the engine running. As you see here, it's miraculously running. Ignore the slight rattle. It does have slightly dry lifters after being sat for a long time without being run. It does quieten down very quickly. The next stage is to just measure the voltage at the battery whilst the car's idling. And you can see here we're getting a very healthy 14.5 volts. If you want to be absolutely sure that that's not going to fluctuate, feel free to rev the engine or have an assistant rev the engine. And as long as that voltage does not vary, then your alternator is in good condition. So I let the car run for a further 30 minutes or so. So as you can see, it was a very cold day. The inside of the car, I've got 4 dehumidifier things in there, and it actually had fogged up slightly on the windscreen, so there was actually moisture on the windscreen itself. Anyway, obviously your next job is to set the clock, but obviously take it for a drive, make sure everything's okay, and you should be good. If you found this video useful, you know what to do. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and do all that good stuff. But until next time, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.